So what is your number one concern then?
It really remains around the virus, to be honest with you. I want to know what happens in the back end of the year. We're clearly going to get to a place where 65, 66% of the population is vaccinated in the next 90 days. And then where do we go? Because if we can't get 80% compliance, including 10% that have already been herd inoculated by having COVID, I think it resurges each fall, just like the flu or influenza or pneumonia does. And that's a bad thing, particularly if it's a variant that's very viral in terms of spreading or causes, more respiratory illness that ends up in death. And so that could be a problem. There are countries like Canada, which have been a disaster in managing. If you're in Canada right now, you can't get a second shot. The economy is completely shut down. If you want to go and do business there, you have to go to an internment camp where you're in prison for some period of time. I don't know what they're doing up there, but it's a mess. But there's other countries in the same boat. But to see a G7 country like Canada in that situation tells you there's still risk in the virus. Biden did one thing well. He promised logistics to deliver viruses, and he did. Most people here that want 2 shots have had them, but it's probably one of the only countries in the world that's the case. Even in Switzerland and France and Germany, there's various versions. I was speaking to a fund manager today in Switzerland. They're not opening restaurants till next Monday, and even so, it's going to be socially distanced. And so they really haven't. They're about 6 months behind the U.S., and Canada's probably a year behind the U.S. And so those are still big problems that could affect what equity markets do.
All right, well, Kevin, you clearly have very strong political opinions. And as you mentioned, you've been spending a lot of time in Miami, which is the opposite to Canada in terms of lockdowns, as we covered. And you've been quite critical of Canada's COVID response, which is leading many to wonder if you're perhaps going to do more than just talk about it again and perhaps enter the political fray again. Is that something on the cards for Mr. Wonderful in his future?
I never say never to anything, but I'm so busy as an investor today, and I've got so many projects like the crypto one we talked about that I'm spending a lot of time on. I'm an open critic. I believe you should be critical of government. They serve you. I pay my taxes. I pay a lot of tax in Canada. I pay tax in the United States. I have a vote, and I have a right, and I have a right to speak openly about what I see as a very poorly managed country. Canada is poorly managed. It can do better. But I'm very optimistic for it because no matter how poor the management is at the provincial and federal level, the country is so wealthy. It has so many resources that are still in the ground that the world needs. All it needs to do is to solve for the poor management it has, hire better managers. However you have to do that. I have ideas, others do too. I think Canadian politicians are way underpaid, and we can't seem to get leaders that have been successful in many sectors to come and work as politicians. They've solved for that in Switzerland by paying them well and inviting them and making the campaign laws easy to work with. Canada has a lot of problems there. I have brought a case forward to try and break those laws down because I've seen how they don't work, and they keep mediocrity in government, which is terrible. And as a proud investor there, as a proud citizen and taxpayer, I would like to give back to my country by changing those laws and funding a federal case, which I'm doing. The campaign laws are broken. The country's poorly managed. The COVID pandemic showed the weakness of Canadian management. The country is a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. The fact that you have to go to prison to visit the country in a place where there's no HEPA filters, where people are locked in rooms with no air filtration, where you could get you could die there. I mean, that is so insane that's why it's time to get the spatula out and make the changes. That's the craziest idea I've ever seen. I feel sorry for people that are trying to do business there.
But for my Canadian friends that asked me specifically to ask you if you will attempt a comeback to Canadian politics and rescue the country, the answer is?
I never say never to anything, but I will use my social media platform in the next election to be an open critic of the current management and point out their faults, their weaknesses, their failures, and hope that we as a country can get better managers. We simply need better managers. We are the richest country on earth with the smallest population managed by very, very weak talent. That's my final say on it.